I'm Mia Dorchester, 22, and I built a logistics app that went global after spending a year living out of a storage unit. For years, I worked unpaid for my parents, built their website, ran their business socials, did everything to earn their approval. But the night I turned 18, they dropped me in a parking lot and said, "Good luck out there, failure." That moment changed everything. Ever been cast aside by the very people you sacrificed everything for? If so, drop your story in the comments. You're not alone. Before I get into what happened, tell me where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to cut someone off just to rebuild yourself, hit like and subscribe for more real stories about boundaries, self-worth, and quiet revenge. Because what happened next, you won't see coming. I was 13 the first time my dad called me a soft failure in the making. I hadn't done anything dramatic. I missed a day of helping in the warehouse because I had a school group project due. He said it in passing, like it was just an observation. Not angry, just disappointed. That tone stuck with me more than if he'd screamed. My parents owned a logistics company, regional delivery, warehouse contracts, courier routes. Not glamorous, but profitable. They wore exhaustion like a badge of honor. My mom used to say things like, "We built this from the ground up with our bare hands," even though they bought the business from a cousin and inherited the first fleet of vans. I learned early that facts weren't as important as their version of reality. By the time I was 14, I was working every weekend. My friends were going to movies, babysitting, hanging out at the skate park. I was scrubbing inventory spreadsheets, labeling warehouse bins, sitting in on client calls when someone needed to take notes. "Consider this your education," my dad would say, like I was lucky to be included. They never paid me. Not a cent. And I didn't ask. I was taught that my contribution was part of the family's success, that asking for anything back made me entitled. I was good at it. Better than anyone else they hired. I caught errors before they turned into losses. I fixed the website after a freelancer botched the redesign. I built their first app integration using YouTube tutorials and online forums. But whenever I tried to suggest improvements, I was dismissed. "Don't get ahead of yourself," Dad would say. "You're still green." Or, "We'll do things the way that's worked for us." This isn't a tech company. School was just background noise to them. My grades didn't matter unless they got me out of the way. When I got into the STEM track in high school, they said, "Good. Maybe now you'll stop asking so many questions and just do the work." I stopped showing them report cards after sophomore year. They never noticed. My younger brother, Joseph, didn't have to do any of it. He was 2 years behind me and somehow untouched by the same expectations. When I asked why he wasn't required to help with invoicing or client logistics, Mom said, "He's still a kid. You're the responsible one." That line followed me everywhere. Every holiday. Every birthday. Every time I gave up something to cover a late shift or ran reports while Joseph played video games in the other room. When Joseph turned 16, they threw him a party with a rented projector screen and catered tacos. When I turned 16, I worked an 8-hour shift inventorying returned packages and got a $15 Target gift card taped inside a company envelope. I started applying to colleges behind their backs. Not because I had some grand vision yet, I just knew I wanted out. Away from the business. Away from them. Away from feeling like I owed my life to a system where I was both the employee and the liability. When I got into a solid-state school with a computer science program, I printed the acceptance letter and left it on the kitchen counter. That night, Dad held it up and said, "What's this supposed to be?" "My acceptance letter," I said, trying to sound confident. "I'm going in the fall." He raised an eyebrow and tossed the paper back onto the counter. "And who's paying for that?" I had no answer. I hadn't figured that part out yet. But I told him I was applying for scholarships and could take out loans. Mom chimed in from across the kitchen. "Loans? For what?" "To sit in a classroom and play with code while your brother and your father keep this business afloat." That was the beginning of the long, slow undoing. The shift in their tone from dismissive to hostile. I became a threat the moment I wanted something they hadn't planned for. Still, I stayed. I worked double hours all summer before college, saved every cent from a side job fixing printers at a local tech repair shop. When school started, I commuted an hour each way and worked part-time between classes. They didn't ask how it was going. Over winter break, I built them a dashboard system for real-time route tracking. I'd spent months coding it between assignments and exams. It cut their daily driver communication by over 60%. Dad looked at the interface for 5 minutes and said, "This would have been useful last year." A little late, don't you think? I stopped offering after that. By sophomore year, I was mostly paying for myself, food, gas, tuition. They still let me live at home, but I started to feel like a squatter in my own family. Joseph had the run of the house. He crashed my study sessions, took my charger, used my laptop without asking. When I confronted him, he laughed and said, "Relax, I'm family." When I asked my parents to back me up, Mom shrugged. "You're so tightly wound all the time. Maybe try being less intense." They never asked about my projects, never asked what I wanted after graduation. And when I brought it up, when I tried to share that I'd started coding an app on my own time, something I thought could really take off, Dad said, "You know how many people think they've built the next big thing? 99% end up broke. And the smart ones come crawling back to real work." The app wasn't even public yet. I'd just started the back end, still rough. But the idea was solid. A logistics tool for small businesses that couldn't afford big enterprise platforms. Something simple, intuitive, plug and play. I worked on it at night, between assignments, between shifts. I didn't sleep much. Didn't talk about it anymore. I just built. One night, I came home late from a networking event. It was part of a student startup group. We'd had a pitch workshop, and I stayed behind to help another student troubleshoot a bug. When I walked in the door, Dad was sitting in the dark living room. "You think you're better than us now?" he asked. "No," I said quietly. He stood up and walked toward me. "Then why do you act like this business is beneath you?" I didn't answer. He scoffed. "You're gonna learn the hard way. You keep chasing these pipe dreams, you'll be lucky to end up a homeless failure." He walked past me, went to bed. I stood there for a long time. I don't remember what I felt. Probably nothing. I'd stopped expecting anything different from him. That was 6 months before my 18th birthday. I never told anyone what he said. Not even my best friend. Because somewhere deep down, a part of me still wanted to prove him wrong. But I knew no matter what I did, it wouldn't change who he decided I was. And eventually, I stopped trying. I stopped giving updates. I stopped fixing things. All I focused on was the app. And the day I turned 18, they made it very clear what I meant to them. But that's for next time. By senior year, things felt more like a business contract than a family. I got home from school, helped at the warehouse, managed client requests, then spent my nights trying to teach myself Python. I'd finish my homework at the kitchen table, headphones in, while Joseph played video games with the volume way too loud. If I asked him to turn it down, Mom would tell me to study in my room. If I moved to my room, Dad would say I was being antisocial. I kept my head down and kept building. I'd started outlining a basic prototype, something small. A tool for optimizing local delivery routes based on traffic patterns, fuel cost, and delivery windows. I thought maybe if I could show them the real potential of tech, they'd finally take me seriously. Instead, one afternoon, when I asked Dad if I could take a day off work to attend a student coding event downtown, he didn't even look up from the invoices he was reviewing. "Apps are a waste of time," he muttered. "You're not smart enough for that world." He said it like he was commenting on the weather. Just stating a fact. I remember standing there, holding the flyer for the event in my hand, feeling the heat rise in my face. I didn't argue. I just turned around, went upstairs, and registered anyway. I skipped work that day and went to the event. I didn't know anyone, but I left with a notebook full of ideas and the contact info of a woman who ran a local startup accelerator. She told me to send her my app once I had a working beta. It was the first time someone outside my family looked at me like I might actually know what I was doing. That small moment of recognition stuck with me. When I got home that night, Dad was already asleep. Mom didn't ask where I'd been. Joseph was on the couch eating leftovers and watching YouTube. I just walked past all of them and went straight to my laptop. They didn't notice. By that point, I was used to it. I kept applying to schools, programs with decent comp sci tracks, nothing flashy. I wasn't aiming for Stanford. I just needed a place where I could be around people who spoke the same language I was teaching myself at night. When I got into community college with a decent transfer pipeline, I left the letter out on the counter. Joseph saw it first. He picked it up, skimmed it, then said, "Did they seriously accept you?" Before I could answer, Mom took it out of his hands. She didn't smile. She didn't congratulate me. She just said, "And what exactly are you planning to do with this?" I told her I wanted to build tech for logistics, things like the app I'd been working on. She rolled her eyes. "This again?" I nodded. "Yes, this again." A few days later, they called a family meeting. I remember the formality of it. Like they were delivering news to a team of employees. We sat at the kitchen table. Dad had a manila folder with some papers in it. Joseph was there, too, chewing gum and staring at his phone. "We've been thinking," Dad started. "You're almost 18. We've done our part. Fed you, clothed you, gave you work experience. But at some point, you have to stop expecting handouts." I didn't say anything. He slid the folder across the table. Inside was a list of resources, cheap housing, food banks, a flyer for some job readiness nonprofit. "We're not going to stop you from chasing your dream," he continued. "But we're not going to bankroll it either. If you think you're ready for the real world, then go prove it." 2 weeks later was my 18th birthday. I kept waiting for them to take it back. To say they were testing me. That they were proud. That this was some twisted rite of passage. But they didn't. I asked if I could at least stay until the end of the semester. Dad shook his head. "Deadlines are deadlines," he said. "You want to be taken seriously? Start by showing you can stand on your own." That was the first time I realized they didn't just doubt me. They wanted me to fail. They needed me to fail. Because if I succeeded, it would mean they'd been wrong about me all along. I tried one more time. I brought my laptop into the living room, showed Dad the early version of the app. Basic wireframes, a working demo of the route optimizer. It wasn't polished, but it worked. He watched for less than 30 seconds. Then he leaned back, crossed his arms, and said, "You think this is impressive? Kid at church runs a business with 3 apps already in the store. That's real tech." I nodded, closed my laptop, and walked away. I didn't show him anything after that. The next few weeks were tense. I started packing my things slowly, keeping it quiet. I sold a few things online, took extra shifts at the repair shop, stayed up late looking for places to stay. Joseph asked me once if I was really going to leave or if this was just some dramatic stunt. I said nothing. He shrugged. "Whatever. Don't forget to leave your charger." The week before my birthday, I got a message from the startup accelerator woman I met at the coding event. She asked how the app was going. Said she might have a contact who'd be interested in mentoring a student founder. I didn't tell anyone. I was sleeping 4 hours a night, eating ramen, juggling coursework and gig jobs. But the beta was coming together. Slowly. At dinner one night, I mentioned I was thinking about renting a storage unit for my stuff until I could figure out housing. Mom barely looked up from her plate. "That's probably a good idea," she said. "Real world's not as easy as people think." I should have been devastated. But I was mostly numb. The sadness had burned out months ago. All that was left was motion. Just keep building. Just keep going. The Friday night before my birthday, I got home from work and found my duffel bag by the front door. Joseph was playing video games. Mom was folding laundry. Dad was sitting in his recliner with a beer. Nobody said a word. I stood there for a minute. Then Dad looked over and said, "Good luck out there, failure." And that was it. No hug. No last-minute pep talk. No hidden envelope with cash. Just those 5 words. I carried my bag to the car. I didn't look back. Because I already knew there was nothing left to see. The night of my 18th birthday, I didn't blow out candles. There was no cake, no dinner, no one saying, "Happy birthday." Just my parents standing by the trunk of my dad's car, arms crossed, waiting for me to stop asking questions and get in. They'd packed my things into 3 garbage bags. Not boxes, bags. The kind you'd toss after a spring cleaning. One had my clothes, one had my laptop and a few notebooks, and the third held some toiletries and an old blanket from the guest room. Joseph didn't come outside. He was in the living room, probably playing video games. I don't know if he even knew I was leaving for good. We drove in silence. I sat in the back seat. My dad's window was cracked just enough to let the cold night air in. My mom scrolled on her phone. I watched the streetlights flash across the ceiling of the car, trying to memorize how it felt to be driven somewhere without knowing if I'd ever come back. They pulled into a grocery store parking lot off the highway. My dad threw the car into park and turned around. "All right," he said, like he was dropping off a package. "This is where we part ways." I didn't move. I was waiting for the rest of the sentence. A suggestion, maybe. A warning. Even a lie to soften the blow. He popped the trunk. "You'll figure it out," Mom said without turning around. "You always thought you were smarter than everyone else." I got out. The cold hit immediately. It was mid-March and I hadn't worn a jacket, just a hoodie and jeans. I pulled the bags out of the trunk one at a time. Dad didn't get out of the car. He rolled the window down halfway. "Good luck out there, failure." Then he drove off. No hug. No last-minute check-in. No emergency number. Just the sound of tires on wet pavement. I stood there in the middle of the parking lot, holding everything I owned in two hands, watching their taillights disappear into traffic. Eventually, I sat down on the curb. It was late. The grocery store was closed. A few cars passed by but didn't stop. I scrolled through my phone contacts. I didn't have many options. I ended up texting a girl from class I barely knew, someone I'd partnered with on a lab project. Her name was Lexi. I told her I missed my last bus and needed somewhere to crash for the night. She picked me up 20 minutes later without asking questions. We parked outside her apartment building. She apologized for not having a couch and let me sleep in the back seat of her car. I didn't sleep much. The next morning, I thanked her, lied about heading to a friend's, and spent the rest of the day walking around with my bags. I found a diner with free Wi-Fi and sat in a booth for hours nursing a coffee. By that night, I was calling storage facilities. One finally answered. I didn't ask questions I didn't want answers to. Just told the guy I needed a place for a few bags and would pay cash. He didn't ask my name. Just gave me a number and a code. Unit 117. It was 10 by 10 feet. Concrete floor. Metal walls. No insulation. No lighting except what leaked in from the hallway. I shoved my bags in the corner, curled up on the blanket, and used my hoodie as a pillow. That first night in the storage unit was quiet in a way that felt unnatural. You don't realize how many sounds a house makes until you're alone with none. Just your own breathing and the echo of your thoughts. I was too tired to cry. Too used to being ignored to feel surprised. The next few weeks blurred together. I kept going to class. Took on every freelance gig I could find, editing spreadsheets, debugging code for other students, updating small websites for local businesses. I showered at the campus gym. Ate whatever I could buy with $5, mostly instant noodles, dollar menu burgers, granola bars. I stored everything in my backpack and kept it with me at all times. If anyone asked, I said I was just busy. Always coming from something, heading somewhere. No one looked close enough to see past it. Not because I was trying to hide it. Because I didn't think anyone would care. The only person I kept in touch with regularly was the woman from the startup accelerator, Natalie. She checked in every few weeks asking how the app was coming. I'd send her updates, links to my GitHub, screenshots of the UI. She never pushed. Never asked about my personal life. Just gave feedback, suggestions, encouragement. She was the only adult in my life who treated me like I had potential instead of problems. I kept building. The app was starting to work. I called it Streamline. A lightweight platform that helped small delivery businesses plot daily routes based on traffic, fuel usage, and time windows. Simple interface. No fluff. I tested it using mock data pulled from my parents' old routing files. I knew their system inside out. Some nights, I'd stay up until 3 a.m. watching videos on UI/UX best practices, writing code, fixing bugs. Then I'd wake up at 7, eat a granola bar, and go to class like nothing was wrong. The storage unit was cold in spring and unbearable in early summer. I bought a battery-powered fan and used the bathroom at a nearby fast food place to splash water on my face. By July, I had 2 small clients, both mom-and-pop courier services. I pitched them my app, gave them 2 weeks free. After that, One of them offered to pay me $200 a month. I used the money to rent a tiny room from a retired mechanic who didn't ask questions as long as the rent came in cash. It was barely better than the storage unit, but it had a bed and a window. That same month, Natalie introduced me to someone, an investor who liked early-stage logistics tools. I didn't get funding, but I got advice. Real, actionable advice that made the app better. I started thinking maybe this could actually go somewhere. Still, I didn't tell anyone where I'd been sleeping. Not my classmates. Not the teachers who praised my work ethic. Not even Lexi, who still sometimes waved to me in the hallway like we were old friends. Because by then, I'd learned something important. When you grow up with people who see your value only in terms of what you do for them, you stop expecting anyone to care about what happens when you're no longer useful. So I kept my head down, built my app, wrote clean code, hit every deadline, and waited for the day I wouldn't need to explain anything to anyone. That day wasn't far off. But I wasn't there yet. Not then. By the time fall semester started, the rhythm had settled. I'd wake up before sunrise in the room I rented from a retired mechanic named Jim, shower with water that took 5 minutes to get lukewarm, grab a slice of cold toast, and walk the 40 minutes to campus with my laptop in a padded messenger bag. I didn't have Wi-Fi at the house, so I timed my coding hours around the library's late schedule. No one knew how I lived. I showed up to class on time, answered questions, submitted assignments early. Professors started learning my name. A few even commented on how disciplined I seemed. One said, "I can always count on you to hand and clean working code." I nodded and said thank you, but in my head I just thought, of course I'm disciplined. I don't have a choice. The app was slowly evolving. I'd made progress on the optimization engine, added user roles, and started testing it with real businesses. I'd onboard 3 small clients by December. The first check I got for $400 felt surreal. It wasn't much, but it came from something I built with my own hands. That winter, I had a decision to make: buy better hosting infrastructure to scale the app, or fix the heat in my rented room. I chose the app. I slept in 3 layers of clothes that month. Christmas came and went. No call. No message. Not from my parents. Not from Joseph. Not even a lazy forwarded meme from Mom's Facebook account. I knew they hadn't changed their number. Joseph still posted regularly from the house Wi-Fi. They just didn't see a reason to check in. I didn't dwell on it. By then, I'd stopped expecting anything. In a way, it was freeing. For years, every decision I made had been through the lens of whether they'd approve. Whether I'd finally be enough. Smart enough. Responsible enough. Worthy enough. Now, I was finally operating in a world where their opinion didn't matter. That realization didn't crush me. It steadied me. The silence became a kind of clarity. I stopped second-guessing myself. I started asking for help when I needed it, just not from them. Natalie, the woman from the accelerator, introduced me to a group of student developers working on passion projects. We started meeting every Saturday at a cheap cafe near campus. Everyone brought their laptops, shared bugs, offered advice. They didn't care about my background or where I was living. They cared about clean code and working demos. For the first time in years, I felt like I belonged somewhere. The app, Streamline, kept improving. I added route history exports, fuel consumption analytics, and a simple dashboard for dispatchers. One of my early clients forwarded it to a friend, and suddenly I had 6 accounts. I charged modest monthly fees. Enough to cover hosting costs, basic expenses, and slowly build an emergency fund. By the start of spring, I'd paid off my credit card balance. I didn't tell anyone, because in my world, wins were for momentum, not for celebration. I kept my head down and kept building. One day, a professor pulled me aside after class. "You've got good instincts," he said. "Are you planning on transferring to a 4-year program after this?" I told him I wasn't sure I could afford it. He said he'd write me a recommendation if I ever changed my mind. That night, I opened a blank document and started outlining what it would take to finish a degree in computer science. How many courses, how much it would cost, what kind of aid I might qualify for. I wasn't ready to commit to it yet. But I didn't close the document. Around that same time, I started sleeping more. Not because life had gotten easier, because my body had stopped existing in crisis mode. I'd gone from surviving hour by hour to planning a week ahead, then a month, then a quarter. And somewhere in the middle of that quiet, ordinary stretch of time, it hit me, I didn't miss them. Not really. I missed the idea of having parents. The kind who ask if you're warm enough in the winter. The kind who show up with soup when you're sick. Who remember your birthday. But I didn't miss them. Not the judgment. Not the silence. Not the way they used love like a reward system. I didn't hate them. I just finally saw them for what they were. And what they weren't. By May, Streamline had 12 paying clients and a new landing page. Natalie introduced me to someone in logistics software who helped me polish my pitch deck. I started thinking about investors. Not big ones. Just a few who might fund a pilot. I built a timeline. A 6-month growth plan. I didn't tell anyone I was 19, sleeping in a rented room, managing a full class load and a software launch on the same calendar. I just kept going. Then one night, walking home from the cafe where I usually worked late, I passed a delivery van with my parents' old company logo. It was parked outside a small print shop. The driver wasn't my dad. The company had grown. Or maybe shrunk. I stood there for a second, just looking at the logo. A part of me expected to feel something, rage, sadness, betrayal. But there was nothing. I turned the corner and kept walking. 2 blocks later, I caught myself smiling. Because for the first time since they left me in that parking lot, I knew exactly where I was going. And none of it had anything to do with proving them wrong. I wasn't chasing revenge. I wasn't chasing approval. I was just chasing momentum. And that was enough. A few days later, I got an email from a regional entrepreneur showcase. They'd seen the app's website. Asked if I wanted to apply to pitch. I almost didn't respond. But then I thought, why not? I filled out the application, sent it in, and went back to coding. Quiet. Focused. The same way I'd been from the start. Only now, the silence wasn't empty. It was earned. By the end of that second year, the version of my life I'd been quietly building started to show up in public. The pitch at the Regional Entrepreneur Showcase landed well. Clean demo. Solid numbers. Clear use case. A week later, I got an email from an angel investor based in Toronto. Then another from someone in Boston. Nothing big, early stage, low equity asks, but they were serious. They asked the right questions. Knew the market. I didn't jump. I did my homework, got advice from Natalie, asked hard questions right back. Eventually, I took a small pre-seed check, just enough to scale the app, tighten security, hire a part-time dev to help with the backend. I signed the paperwork at a library cubicle. No champagne. No celebratory dinner. Just a quiet click of the pen and a silent promise to myself I wasn't going to waste it. With that check, I moved out of Jim's place and into a real apartment. Nothing fancy. 1 bedroom. Radiator heat. A window that looked out over a narrow street. But it had working locks and hot water and enough space to stretch my legs. The night I moved in, I sat on the floor with takeout and opened my laptop on the windowsill. I took a photo, just the laptop, the coffee mug, the view. Posted it with no caption. Didn't tag anyone. Didn't mention the app. It was just a moment I wanted to remember. 3 days later, my mom called. I hadn't heard from her in nearly 18 months. The contact photo on my screen looked ridiculous, an old family Christmas picture from when I was 14. I let it ring twice before I picked up. Her voice was shaky. "Hi," she said. "Hi, sweetheart." I didn't respond. Just waited. She started crying. "I didn't know who else to call," she said. "We're in trouble." I leaned back in the chair. "What kind of trouble?" "The business," she said. It's not doing well. One of our major vendors pulled out. There was a bad quarter. Joseph, well, he's not handling things right. We're behind on invoices. The lease is up. She stopped herself. Took a breath. We need help. There was silence on my end. Then I asked from who. There was a pause. From you. I looked out the window. It was late. Quiet. Streetlights casting long shadows on the sidewalk. From the failure? I said. She went completely silent. Then I heard shuffling and my dad's voice came on the line. He didn't yell. He didn't apologize. He just said, "We didn't mean it." We were scared. It was the most vulnerable I'd ever heard him sound. But I didn't move. I didn't soften. Because suddenly, I was back in that parking lot on my 18th birthday. Back in the freezing cold, holding everything I owned in garbage bags, watching their car drive away. "We thought we were teaching you to be strong," he added. We thought it would make you tough." I said nothing, because I knew the truth. It wasn't about teaching me anything. It was about control. The second I stopped being useful to their business or obedient to their worldview, they dropped me. And now, with their backs against the wall, I was useful again. "We just need a bridge," my mom said, getting back on the line. "Short-term support. You've always been resourceful." You figured wrong," I said. A long silence. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't crying. I just sounded done. Because I was. "I survived," I said. "I built something. Alone. And not once, in the worst months of my life did either of you think to check in. But now that your world's falling apart, you remember I exist." "It's not like that," Mom whispered. "It's exactly like that." I could hear them breathing. I pictured them in the living room, the same recliner, same phone table, same patterned couch from my childhood. Everything familiar except the power dynamics had shifted. They needed me. And I didn't owe them anything. "Mia, please," Dad said, low and tense. "We're still your family." I shook my head slowly. "No. You made it very clear. Family supports each other. That's what you taught me by not doing it. And now that it's inconvenient for you, you want to redo." "What do you want me to say?" he snapped, the edge returning to his voice. "That we were wrong?" "Yes," I said simply. "But not just say it. Mean it. And understand what it cost me." He didn't answer. I took a breath. "I'm not sending money," I said. "I'm not consulting. I'm not fixing your books. I'm not writing code. I built something they laughed at. Now it works. And it works without you." More silence. Then my mom said, barely above a whisper, "Are you really going to turn your back on us?" "I didn't turn my back," I said. "You turned yours 2 years ago." She started to cry again. I let it hang there. Not because I enjoyed it, but because for once, I wanted them to sit in the discomfort they'd created. "I hope things work out," I said finally. "But I'm not your backup plan." Then I ended the call. I stared at the phone for a long time after that. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt quiet. Like something that had been pressing against my ribs for years had finally stopped moving. I turned off the lights, went back to my desk, and kept working. Because no matter what they needed from me now, I knew exactly what I needed from them. Nothing. It didn't take long for the story to make its way back to them. I hadn't done anything flashy. No interviews, no big launch party. I wasn't bragging online. But business is small and people talk. A client of mine had a cousin who used to work with my parents. Someone else forwarded the app link. Then someone else mentioned the article that ran on a niche tech blog about how a 20-year-old developer was helping small couriers cut costs by 40%. The headline didn't mention my name in full. Just Mia D, a scrappy solo founder from Ontario. But that was enough. A week later, I got a text from an old coworker from my parents' warehouse. "You really built this, huh? Your dad's trying to tell people he helped." I stared at the message for a while before replying. Let him try. Because I knew better. People remember how you treat your own. Especially in small-town business circles, where every handshake and every holiday card builds your reputation. It started quietly. A few clients pulled their contracts. Someone else didn't renew. A local supplier they'd worked with for years stopped returning emails. They tried to cover it up at first. Told people they were restructuring. Said Joseph was handling the transition. But when you've spent 2 decades acting like you're untouchable, you don't get to control the narrative once it shifts. They told people I'd always been ambitious. Said they were proud I'd taken the initiative. Acted like I'd launched the app from the comfort of their home office, with their blessing. But the people who knew really knew weren't buying it. They remembered. They remembered the way my parents talked about me in public. The tough love. The jokes about me living in my head. The way they never showed up to school events, but always posted about Joseph's rugby games. No amount of spinning could erase that. I didn't correct the record. I didn't call them out. But I didn't help them clean it up either. I let the silence speak for itself. I focused on the app. We added fleet-wide alerts, back-end integrations with accounting tools, and a simplified onboarding process. We crossed 20 paying clients in the spring and hit profitability by summer. I hired 2 part-time developers from my Saturday coding group. Gave them flexible hours, good pay, and decision-making power. Everything I wished someone had given me. We worked out of my apartment until a local co-working space offered us free access in exchange for doing a case study. I said yes. Not for the exposure. For the extra outlets and working air conditioning. My days filled up fast, client calls in the morning, development sprints in the afternoon, long nights debugging edge cases. And still, in the background, I was hearing things. My parents were slipping. Word was, a tax filing error had triggered an audit. A key client moved their contracts to a larger regional firm. Joseph tried to pivot into tech, built a clunky dashboard using outdated tools, and pitched it as cutting edge. One of his potential clients sent the pitch to me by accident. "Hey, you related to this guy?" I replied, "Used to be." They didn't respond after that. Eventually, my dad called again. He didn't leave a voicemail. I let it go to missed call and left it there. A week later, I got an email. Subject line, "Just hoping you'll read this." 3 paragraphs about how pride got in the way, and we know we weren't fair, and maybe one day we can talk, no pressure. I didn't reply. I didn't delete it either. I archived it. They were unraveling. And I was thriving. It wasn't satisfying in the way I thought it might be. It just felt balanced. Like the scales had finally stopped tilting against me. There were days when I'd pass a courier van with the logo of one of my new clients and wonder if my dad had seen it too. If he knew I was the one keeping that business alive now. If he knew that same client used to sit at our kitchen table for dinner deals and now paid me to help them scale without relying on companies like his. Sometimes, I'd get a flood of LinkedIn notifications, people from their network trying to connect. Old friends. Former coworkers. Even one of their old mentors. I accepted a few. Ignored the rest. No captions. No explanations. Just the quiet visibility of someone they thought would disappear. I didn't take any public shots. Didn't post about what happened. Didn't write a viral Medium essay about being thrown out at 18. Because I didn't need to. Everyone already knew. And even if they didn't, it wasn't the point anymore. I hadn't built this business to prove something. I'd built it because I saw a gap. I built it because I needed something of my own when no one else gave me a place to land. And I wasn't going to give up any of that clarity now, not even for the satisfaction of being right. So I kept working. I kept hiring people who needed second chances. Kept giving interns from overlooked schools the mentorship I never had. One of them asked me once why I never mentioned my family when I told my story. I said, because they're not the story. The story was the warehouse I used to sleep in. The clients who took a chance on an unproven app. The nights I coded in public libraries and showered in gym stalls. The strangers who handed me opportunities while the people who raised me walked away. And that, more than any revenge fantasy, was the real transformation. I hadn't just survived. I'd built a world where none of their rules applied. Where the version of me they tried to contain no longer existed. And every time their phone rang with another canceled contract or quiet goodbye, I knew they were sitting in the same space they left me in. Only now it was theirs to navigate. And I didn't owe them a map. It started with a letter. A real one, not an email. Handwritten, 2 pages, tucked into a plain white envelope with no return address. The handwriting was shaky but unmistakable, my mom's. I found it in my mailbox after a long day of back-to-back client calls and investor check-ins. At first I thought it was junk mail. Then I saw my name spelled out in full on the front, and I stood in the hallway for a moment before opening it. The first line read, "I don't know if you'll read this, but I hope you will." She didn't try to rewrite history. She admitted they'd made choices out of pride, fear, and outdated ideas about success. She said she wished they'd handled things differently. Said she was sorry they hadn't recognized what I needed, what I was trying to build. She wrote that they were in a tough place, financially, professionally, and that while they were trying to keep the business afloat, it was clear the version they'd clung to wasn't working anymore. But what struck me most was the final paragraph. "We're not asking for money. We're asking to understand how you did what you did. If you're willing to sit down with us, even just once, we'd be grateful." I didn't respond right away. I left the letter on my kitchen counter and went about my week. 3 days later, I reread it. Then I sent a text. "If you're serious, we can meet for coffee. 1 hour. No expectations." They agreed. We met at a neutral place, a small cafe halfway between my apartment and their side of town. It was quiet, the kind of place with soft lighting and too many ceramic mugs. When I walked in, they were already seated. My mom looked older than I remembered. My dad looked smaller somehow. Not physically, but in presence. I sat down, ordered tea, and said nothing. I figured if they wanted the meeting, they could start it. It was my mom who spoke first. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. I nodded. My dad cleared his throat. "We're not going to pretend we didn't mess up. I've been thinking about that night for a long time. Dropping you off like that. It wasn't." He stopped mid-sentence, then tried again. "It wasn't something I'm proud of." I stayed quiet. "We thought we were being tough," my mom said, "but the truth is, we didn't know how to handle a kid who didn't follow the path we laid out." My tea arrived. I stirred it slowly. Then finally I said, "Why now?" My dad looked at me. "Because it's clear you figured it out. And we didn't. And if there's a chance we can learn how to build something better, like you did, we'd like to try." I didn't soften. I didn't rush to comfort them. Because I remembered exactly how it felt when I had nothing and they had a house, a business, and the nerve to leave me in a parking lot. But I also wasn't there to punish them. So I said what I'd decided before I showed up. I'm not going to fund a comeback. I'm not going to consult for free. I'm not going to clean up the damage. They both nodded slowly. But I continued, "If you really want to understand what it takes to start over from the ground up, I'll teach you. Not as your daughter. As someone who knows what it means to build without a safety net." My mom blinked a few times, her eyes glossy. "No shortcuts," I added. "No old contacts. No backdoor deals. You'd be starting from scratch. That's the only way this works." They were quiet for a while. Then my dad said, "Well, think about it." I stood up, finished my tea, and told them they could reach out if they decided to commit. Not half-heartedly. Not conditionally. Fully. That was 6 months ago. I haven't heard back. Not a call. Not a message. They're still posting sporadically on social media, stock photos with generic business advice. Joseph started working at a warehouse in another city. I think he's trying to get away from the mess too. I check in occasionally, not out of nostalgia, just to see if they took the offer seriously. They haven't. And I'm not surprised. Because the kind of humility it takes to start over is the same kind they never showed me. They wanted the outcome, not the process. The credibility, not the climb. I gave them a window and they didn't walk through it. And I'm okay with that. Because rebuilding trust isn't about one conversation in a cafe. It's about what you do after the door's cracked open. Whether you step through it or retreat into the comfort of your old story. They chose the story. And I chose to keep building mine. With people who've earned a seat at my table. People who've shown up, quietly and consistently. People who see me, not as someone who finally made it, but as someone who never should have been counted out in the first place. That table is full now. And I don't save chairs for people who only show up when they're hungry. Now I lead a team of 9. Half remote, half local. Most of them came from unconventional backgrounds, people who dropped out, started late, or were passed over because they didn't fit some template. We work in a co-working space that still smells faintly of printer ink and burned coffee. There's nothing flashy about it, no sleek headquarters, no exposed brick walls, but it works. We've got whiteboards, standing desks, and a decent espresso machine that someone's always fixing. The app has gone through 4 major updates. What started as a basic tool for small delivery companies has grown into a platform that serves hundreds of drivers across multiple regions. We added automated compliance checks, live route optimization, and fleet performance tracking. One client told us our software saved them enough in fuel and staffing costs to hire 2 new drivers. Another sent a handwritten thank you note. I keep it pinned above my desk. We're not a unicorn. We're not going public. We're just solid, respected, and profitable. I've spoken at 2 logistics conferences. The first time I walked on stage, I wore sneakers and a black blazer. I didn't lead with my backstory. I talked about route inefficiencies, edge case scenarios, and what small operators need but never get from big platforms. But afterwards, during the Q&A, someone always asks, "What made you want to build this?" And I always give the same answer. I didn't want to build something. I had to. Sometimes they laugh. Sometimes they nod. Either way, they understand. I mentor a few students now, mostly from underfunded programs. I tell them what no one told me: how to price their work, how to protect their IP, how to walk away from the wrong clients. I don't waste time trying to look like someone they should admire. I just show up. Because that's what I needed back then. Someone to show up. People ask if I've forgiven my parents. I never know how to answer that. Forgiveness implies there's still something between us. Some cord to be untangled. But I don't feel connected to them anymore, not in anger, not in grief. Just distance. They haven't reached out since the cafe. They didn't take the offer. They didn't call back. Their business was formally dissolved last month. Someone else bought the lease and gutted the space. A new sign's going up now. I saw a photo online: clean floors, new counters, updated lighting. You wouldn't even know what used to be there. And that feels about right. There's no plaque. No farewell post. Just the quiet disappearance of something that once thought it was permanent. Joseph messaged me recently. Short note. Civil, said he was working in inventory management now and doing better. He asked if I'd meet up for lunch sometime. I said maybe. Because unlike our parents, he was still figuring it out. Still trying. And I can respect that. I don't carry bitterness with me anymore. There's just no room for it. My days are full of work, of decisions, of people who trust me. People who don't care where I came from, only what I can contribute. And I've learned that legacy isn't about who raised you. It's about what you build after they stop showing up. When I look back at that girl in the parking lot, the one holding 3 garbage bags in the dark, I don't feel sorry for her. I feel proud. Not because she was strong, but because she was smart enough to stop waiting for someone else to believe in her. And brave enough to start anyway. That's the part no one talks about. Not the glory. Not the headlines. Just the quiet decision to begin without applause. And to keep going even when no one claps. I still keep my original laptop. The one I used in the storage unit. It barely boots now, but I leave it on a shelf above my desk. Not as a symbol. Not as a warning. Just as a reminder. Of what it took to get here. Of what no one gave me. And what I gave myself. The best kind of revenge isn't proving people wrong. It's becoming someone they no longer have access to. And standing so firmly in your own worth, you don't need anyone else's echo to feel whole. I didn't get there by forgiving them. I got there by choosing not to become them. And that's enough. If you've ever had to walk away from family to protect your peace, I want to hear your story. What was your turning point? Do you think some relationships can be rebuilt after betrayal? Or are some breaks permanent for a reason? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if this hit home for you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real stories about standing your ground and starting over.